Hi, I'm Scott Monaghan, the head of customer success. And in this video, I'm going to show you a technical tutorial of how to create dynamic filters on dashboards in broadcast. Dynamic filtering is one of the coolest new features of Broadcast 2.0. All right, so right now we're looking at a broadcast dashboard and we've got several charts here and there are no filters. All of these charts are static and are built on top of the same static query that is always going to be running. So every time I refresh the page, the queries behind these charts will run and the queries will always be exactly the same. However, if the data in the database changes, of course, these charts might be a little different, but otherwise, they're always going to be exactly the same. So what if we want to add dynamic filters to these? Let me show you how to do it. First thing we want to do is open up the SQL behind the charts, and I'll open up this total docs by reviewer chart. And what this chart is doing is we're just reporting a bar chart on the number of docs that were reviewed by each of these reviewers in the workspace. And let's say for filters we want to add a time period filter, so we can take a look at a slice of time and see how many docs were reviewed. We could also add a filter based on name to be able to see specific reviewers. And then finally, we could add a filter that would exclude any reviewers that didn't at least review a minimum number of documents. And what that actually does is it covers all the different types of filters that we allow you to create, the dynamic filters. And so let me show you how to do it. So the first thing you want to do when you create a filter is you probably want to set your, before even creating the filter, you want to set up your query with the filters as if they would have already been in there. I suggest doing a little testing in SQL Server Management Studio or another way to query your database, just to make sure that everything is returning the way that you want it to. So on that light, we've created our filters for our time range, start date and end date. Then we have our filter for our reviewer, and then we have our minimum doc filter that is not going to return any reviewers who have not at least reviewed a minimum number of docs. And they're used here in the queries. These two here is this in our where clause here, it's saying, hey, only return the documents that have been reviewed between the start date and the end date. And if the start date and the end date are null, we basically ignore it and look at all time. Then for first pass reviewer, we do the same thing. We say, hey, if this first pass reviewer is set, make sure that the name of the reviewers that we are returning all match the filter that we're looking at. And then finally, we only return reviewers that actually have reviewed at least the minimum number of docs. And so I could change these manually up here to dates and names, and it would update based on that. But of course, we want these to be dynamic filters. And dynamic filters work very similarly to the way tokens work in relativity scripts, and tokens have worked in the past in broadcast if you've used those. So what we do for these dynamic filters, we want to define them first. So to define a filter token, the first thing we want to do is start out with double pound. That's how broadcast knows, okay, we're looking for a filter here. Then we want to define the data type. Broadcast at the Broadcast 2 supports 3 different data types: date, string, and number, and we'll show you those all right here. Next, we want to define whether or not this filter can have an empty value, whether it's nullable or not. So I put this little question mark up after the date to say this date is not required. It's okay to have a null value. Otherwise, the filter will be required to be set before the chart will display. Then we put in a little colon, and after the colon, we put the name of the filter that we want, and we finish off with another double pound. And so let's go ahead and do the same thing for the end date here. And then we'll do the same thing down for the first pass reviewer here. One thing to note for strings is that they are not nullable. A string will return an empty string if there's nothing in there. And then let's go down to the numbers, which of course are nullable as well. And so now we have when I save this, Broadcast is going to automatically detect these filters and add them to the dashboard. So let me save here. And you can see this filters button has now appeared. And if I click on filters, we can see all the filters that we just defined. Let's test them out. Let's say we want to look for a first pass reviewer and we just want to look at Scott. So I'll hit Scott and we'll apply the filters. And you can see it's only applying to this chart so far because that's the one we set up. But it looks like it worked. Let's scroll down a little bit and we can see that it's only Scott Monaghan in there. So now our filters are working. So we've got our filters working on one chart, but what if we want to apply these filters to all of these charts? And we probably do. Well, that's really easy to do. We can just go into each chart, and the way Broadcast knows whether to apply a single filter to multiple charts is just based on the filter's name. So if we set up in here to have start date, then start date is going to apply to this chart as well as the one we already defined it for. The same thing with end date and the others. And since this works off of name, you could also use this to have some filters apply to some charts and some to apply to others. So that should be all set on this chart now. So let's load that one up. And while that's thinking, let me go ahead and do these others, and then we can take a look at what we can do with these filters once they've all been defined. That finishes that chart, and we've got one more to go. All right, and once we get this finished off, I can show off really the power of this feature, which I think is really cool. And this really just shows a really basic example, but I know that all of you, I expect, will get pretty creative with this stuff, and I'm excited to see what'll happen. So now we've got these filters set up. These are all set to their null or empty string values, so it's showing everything. But let's say I wanted to just take a look at what folks did in December of 2017. So we go back to December, from December 1st to, let's say, January 1st. And we can just remember we've got 13,000 total documents reviewed over the full course of the review. And our best reviewer, Keith, here did 6,478 over the course of the review. Let's apply the filter now just for the month of December last year. And so now the filters are applying, and we can take a look, and it looks like Keith did a little more than 1,500, and then the total reviewed was a little more than 3,000 in the month of December. So now we're looking at just data from the month of December. The overturn rate's a little bit different. And, let's say we want to see, this guy Keith, he really is reviewing a lot more than anybody else, and his overturn rate in the month of December was also the lowest of anybody. So what if we want to still just take a look at the month of December and take a look at Keith and see what makes him so good at this stuff? So now I can apply these filters, and these three docs aren't really good. These three charts here aren't going to really show us much because now they're just showing us the same information we saw before. But this chart down here, we can now see just the number of documents that Keith was able to redact each day, and as to get him up to 1,555 by the end of the month. And so that really shows off how to create these dynamic filters in your SQL and apply them to your dashboards in broadcast. Now, if you don't have the expertise to do this yourself and you don't have a resource available in your organization to help you with this, just let us know at support@milyli.com and we'll do everything we can to help you be successful with this. And I am excited to see what everyone is going to do with this new feature. Thanks for taking the time to watch this and have a great day.